Hey, everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Week 17 Gambling Show. I have with me today gambling legend, John Ryan. Now, if you're not following John on Twitter, must follow at John Ryan Sports One. Make sure you're following John. Now, John's a pro better, 28 years in the business. In the last 2 years, on his max bets, 74% against the spread. NFL last 3 years, he's clipping 65%. It's like 53.5% to beat break even. He's crushing that. Like I said before, he's at John Ryan Sports One. John Ryan, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Jim. Thanks for the introduction. And for everybody that is listening right now, you want to reciprocate that with Jim's work because, as I've said so many weeks now in a row, his DFS is second to none. The player props are second to none. I truly and honestly have never seen anybody hit winners like he has. It's helped me in DraftKings with my lineups to make even more money than I normally would. And just a lot of thanks to Jim Coventry for his great work.
Thank you, John. Appreciate you. John, we're going to start today breaking down one game. Now, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars playing the Houston Texans. One minor concern, Jacksonville really has nothing to play for this week. Next week is the game against the Titans for the divisional crown, but Doug Peterson says he is playing his starters. That's what we have to go on. That's positive. Houston will have Brandon Cooks in the lineup. It's always been uncertain as to his status with the team. Otherwise, no major injuries that I think would be problematic in this game. John, can you break this game down for us?
Sure. This is an interesting matchup, Jim. As you mentioned, Jacksonville really doesn't have any reason to get somebody subjected to being hurt. But he realizes that the positive momentum that Jacksonville has generated with 3 straight wins, straight up and against the spread, and also winning 5 of their last 7, is more important than resting the starters.
Yep.
Carry momentum if they win this game, I think gives them an even greater edge, maybe as much as 3 points in value in the marketplace, going up against Tennessee in that final game to decide the division title. Houston has actually beaten, this is hard to believe, but Houston has beaten Jacksonville 9 consecutive times. By far the most wins that Houston has generated against any opponent in the NFL. So there's a little bit of momentum, or not momentum, but reason there for the Jacksonville Jaguars to put out a good effort and just end that losing streak. And on paper, Jacksonville's just a vastly better team than Houston right now. Houston had lost God knows how many in a row until they upset Tennessee last week, 19-14 in that particular matchup. I don't think they're going to put 2 in a row together here. There's too much on the line for Jacksonville. And Jacksonville, here's the interesting thing about their defense, Jim. And I just discovered this about 30 minutes ago, actually. The Jags allowed 3 points in their previous win over the Jets, which was 19-3, and they covered as 2.5-point road underdogs. They also allowed fewer than 3 points in week 2 in a 24-0 shutout over the Colts as 3.5-point home dogs. It's only the second time since 2006 that the Jaguars defense has allowed 3 or fewer points twice in the same season. I got to believe that is going to spill over and really give this team a lot of momentum going into this game and win the division title. Lastly, we have a betting system here. We're going to bet on teams that have covered the spread in 3 consecutive games. The game is taking place in the last 3 weeks of the regular season, and our team has at least 4 more wins than the opponent. Pretty simple. 22-5 straight up. So if you're a money line player, I think you're going to love this. 82%. 19-8 for 70.4% against the spread. And even the over for you total players out there is pretty healthy at 16-10 with 1 push, 62%. And that's all since 2008. So, Jim, I think Jacksonville wins this by double digits tomorrow.
I like how you broke that down. And I agree. Doug Peterson understands this is a younger team. And a younger team, it's not about resting players. You rest veteran squads, old players on your team. They need momentum. And if they lose this game, that puts them in a really negative spot. So I agree with the breakdown. And of course, John he understands the NFL part of it. He gives you the greatest trends to work with to show you how to put the merge between the gambling aspect and the NFL aspect together. So hopefully you're learning from John as you go. And if not, at least you're profiting from John. All right. I'm going to give you a few prop bets to work with. Of course, I'll give you the rationale for them. That's my whole deal, like John. And then we'll come back. We'll do another game with John and keep moving forward. So I have 3 props. It was 4. I whittled it down to 3. Lost a little confidence in one of them. First prop I'm going with Saquon Barkley against the Colts over 78.5 rushing yards. Now, Barkley was in a funk. He had a 6-game period where he didn't even hit 63 yards rushing. But in the last 2 weeks, the Giants have figured a couple things out. And Barkley to a degree. He's at 84 and 87 yards, well over that 78-yard rushing mark. Now, also understand the Giants, they get ridiculed for their offensive line. They're not a good pass blocking line. They're a little bit above average per Pro Football Focus in their run blocking. Here's where the key comes in on Barkley. We know he's getting usage, first of all. He's the engine of the offense. They have to win. They're trying to make the playoffs. But Indianapolis, here's the opponent. Now, they were an elite run defense early in the season. But now that's changed. In the last 4 weeks, they're giving up 4.93 yards per carry, well below the league average. To running backs, they're giving up 131 rushing yards per game. Again, last 4 weeks. And we know Barkley gets over 90% of the running back carries. 6 different running backs in the last 10 games against the Colts have gone over 77 rushing yards. And 3 of them have done it in the last 3 games. So this trend is right in the sweet spot. Barkley's playing at a high level. I don't see a trend working against us. There's very little scenario where Indianapolis is blowing out New York. Therefore, Barkley's going to be running the ball for 4 quarters. Second prop. Now, it's funny because the trends last week worked against him. This week, they work for him. Tyler Algier. This is when I tell you, we never have take lock in this industry. We never have an opinion on a player that we can't change when it needs to be changed. Now, Tyler Algier against the Arizona Cardinals, over 77 rush yards. In the last 2 weeks, we've seen a changing of the guard at the running back position in Atlanta. Cordero Patterson was roughly equal in carries, if not getting more than Algier. In the last 2 weeks, Algier has 35 carries to 21 for Patterson. And the yards per carry, Patterson's about 3 yards per carry. Algier is at nearly 6. Now, when we frame out these last 5-game rushing yards for Algier, we need to understand the first 3 games, he was in that equal timeshare. But even in that equal timeshare, he had 55, 54, and 52 yards. Since taking over the lead, 139 and 74 yards. And also understand, he had 4 very difficult run matchups: Washington, Pittsburgh, New Orleans, and Baltimore. And yet he was still producing. Now, Atlanta, again, per Pro Football Focus, they have the number 1 run blocking line in the league. But here again is where we get very confident. He's facing the Arizona Cardinals. They have the 7th worst run defense in the league. But again, injuries, they are getting worse. They've allowed 4.81 yards per carry in the last 8 weeks, but 5.16 over the last 4. So that's almost another third of a yard worse. They allow 129 rushing yards to running backs in their last 4 games. And even just for reference, in recent games, these running backs have gone over 70 yards. Leonard Fournette, Pierre Strong, Latavius Murray. So it's pretty much a smash spot for Tyler Algier. And as we said earlier, Arizona is playing with basically a 4th-string quarterback here. They're not even playing Trace McSorley. They're not playing Colt McCoy. They're obviously not playing Kyler Murray. So this is a game where Atlanta is very unlikely to trail. Algier should be heavy usage. One more. Zach Moss, the same game as Saquon Barkley. Now, Zach Moss is over number 59.5 yards, very low. And he's already crushed that in 2 games. In his first game against Indianapolis, 81 yards. Against the difficult Minnesota run defense last week, he had 65 yards on 12 carries, almost 5.5 yards per carry. Now, we said earlier, we know the Colts aren't blowing out the Giants, but the Giants don't blow anybody out. The Giants play the close games. They run the ball. It's conservative. So Zach Moss is getting 67% of the snaps. He will be heavily using the running game. You should expect nearly 20 carries here. Now, the Giants defense, they've allowed at least 60, which is the number for Moss. They've at least 60 rushing yards to 9 running backs in their last 7 games. That means 2 running backs in the same game have gone over the 60-yard mark. And now the Giants' bottom 5 run defense, they allow in the last 4 games 5.66 yards per carry. Only the Bears are worse. And rushing yards per game in the last 4 weeks, 126. Only Houston is worse. Indianapolis, we watched their offensive line on national TV. We say they stink. Again, in pass protection, they're number 14 in run blocking per Pro Football Focus. They get it done on the ground. Those are my 3 props. Now, before we move back to John, if you are watching on YouTube, please smash the like and subscribe buttons. If you like the content at RotoWire, we'll get you 2 days free, but no credit card, no shenanigans. Just go to rotowire.com/try. And if you're not following John Ryan on Twitter, at John Ryan Sports 1, and I'm at Jim Coventry NFL. John Ryan is back for the second part of his breakdown of games. Philadelphia Eagles, Gardner Minshew put some points on the board last week against Dallas. Great game. They're playing the Saints. Saints still alive for a playoff spot. Reeling. Eagles, Lane Johnson, the right tackle's out. Avonte Maddox, the slot corner's out. Otherwise, they're reasonably healthy. John, give us a breakdown on the Eagles-Saints game for gambling.
Well, I'll start out with a simple statement, Jim, is that I don't care who's quarterbacking the Eagles this week or even in the final week of the regular season. I think it would behoove the Eagles to rest Jalen Hurts and get him as close to 100% as possible for a game that could be almost a month away. My point is that they need to win a game in over the last 2 weeks to get the number 1 seed and be the only team in the conference to have a week off. And this is going to be huge. And right now, the Eagles rank 5th in my power ratings in the entire NFL, led by Buffalo, Kansas City. But get this, Dallas and San Fran now have jumped ahead of the Eagles just marginally, but the Eagles would be 3rd in the rankings in the NFC. However, if I run the optimization for who's going to win the Super Bowl, the Eagles jump way to the front of the pack, only second to the Buffalo Bills to win the Super Bowl if they get that first round bye. So I think that is very, very important in this both conferences, but more so for the Eagles. And when you look at the Eagles stats, Jim, I'm singing to the choir when I tell you this, but there's no comparison between these two teams. The Saints, ranked 14th defensively. The Eagles defense has gotten chewed up a little bit lately, but they're still 10th in scoring defense. They're 2nd in the entire NFL, allowing 302 yards per game, and they're playing at home. And yet the betting market is telling us that the Saints, boy, they could really make this close. I respectfully disagree. I think the Eagles, no matter who is quarterbacking, is a tremendous betting opportunity. One last stat for you. Your points per play is one of my important metrics. Eagles, 2nd offensively, 0.445 points per play. That means that they almost are getting half a point on the scoreboard for every play they run. Really, truly amazing stuff. They are the highest scoring offense in the NFL at 29.7. What else can I tell you here on the other side of the coin? The Philly defense in points per play ranks 10th, 0.327, which is extremely good. But again, 2nd yards per play in the NFL, 4.8. I just don't see how this Saints offense, which has sputtered time and time again on the road, losing record, going against the best record team in football, I don't see it. And here's the system, Jim. We're going to bet on winning record home teams in the last 3 weeks of the regular season. The home team has a winning record on the season, and the guest has a losing record on the season, and the guest is struggling on offense, which I said, the Saints averaging less than 22 points per game. 40-10 straight up for 80% winners straight up. Probably don't want to play that. Maybe you do, but I like 30-17 with 3 pushes against the number over the last 10 seasons for 64% winning bets. Jim, you can tell by my enthusiasm, this is going to be a little bit extra pizza money added to this Eagles bet tomorrow.
And the Saints are missing their two offensive guards. Andres Pete's out. Cesar Ruiz is on the injured reserve. That makes it even more difficult for them. And weeks ago, maybe 7 weeks ago, we thought the Eagles were going to be a bad run defense. They have fixed those problems, not running on them much these days. And those outside corners, we have Darius Slay, James Bradbury. That'll overmatch those receivers. John, as always, you are spot on and love the trends on this one. So we're definitely betting this one up. I am going to give some DFS plays, and then we'll take any questions that are sitting here. So DFS plays. So what I'm looking for here is I'm not necessarily going the stacking route when I give these. I'm giving you players to think about, giving you some rationales as you're creating your laps. These are players you may choose to put in your laps. I'll give you the rationale on those, as I said. Now, if you missed earlier in the show the prop betting, those three prop players are all strong DFS running backs. Saquon Barkley and Tyler Algier are the two best of the group. Now, you would only use Zach Moss in a cash game because at his cheaper salary, you could get a floor on him. Whereas Algier and Barkley both have outstanding upside in their matchups, although all three have great matchups. And then another running back you could consider here would be James Conner. Now, we are going to have David Blau at quarterback for Arizona. Nonetheless, Atlanta is going to have to deal with DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown. Even though Blau's a quarterback, the focus is going to be them. You have to make sure that they don't beat you. Connor has been taking advantage of that lately. He has at least 63 rushing yards in 5 of his last 6 games, at least 20 receiving yards in his last 4. He scored touchdowns in 5 straight. And despite the bad offensive line, with the attention defense has got to pay to those receivers, that's where Connor is getting it done. He plays almost every snap. It's been like 97% snap share in 4 of his last 5 games, so he doesn't leave the field. Atlanta's given up at least 86 rush yards in 6 of their last 8 games. They haven't allowed a rushing touchdown in their last 4, but they have given up 7 touchdowns in their last 9 games, so that's a real short-term streak that isn't hold any water. James Conner is a solid play here, volume-based. I think James Conner is more of a cash game play than a tournament play because his floor is so good. I don't know that he has the stratospheric upside here. Those upside plays would be more Algier and Saquon Barkley. At quarterback, I recommend going with one of the 2 quarterbacks in the Detroit-Chicago game. And this all depends how you want to spend up, and it's going to be an upside and floor battle. Obviously, Justin Fields. Justin Fields faced this defense in Week 10. 43 fantasy points, 46 DraftKings points. He ran for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns. Detroit has given up a ton of rushing production to mobile quarterbacks. At least 6 quarterbacks have run for at least 59 yards against them. Fields has run for at least 71 yards in 7 of his last 9 games, only been under 60 once. Now, Fields was terrible last week. Horrible weather game, high winds. Buffalo defense was able to make adjustments with the weather to take Fields out. Not worried about that here. Detroit's given up 7 rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks. Fields has scored 7 since Week 7. They don't have the team speed to deal with him, and there's the inherent problem. Once Fields gets out on the move, they don't have the types of athletes to deal with him. Once he gets past them, he easily outruns them, gets major chunks of yardage. So he is going to be a little more expensive, as we said, but he has what we call stratospheric upside. If you need to save money at quarterback, but you want high floor, reasonable upside, Jared Goff in the same game. He has been great at home. All except the Miami game, he's had multiple touchdowns in every home game. Actually, he's had 20 touchdowns in 8 home games. And in 4 of his last 6 games at home, 300 passing yards. Now, Chicago, they've allowed 300 yards 3 times in their last 7. Lowest pressure rate in the league. They are missing their best corner, Jalen Johnson. They're missing their slot corner, Kindle Vildor. And they were already bottom 10 in coverage. The Lions' rushing game has not been getting it done lately. They're going to get it done through the air. Either quarterback is good. All right, couple receivers. It's same game. Now, here I'll recommend stacking. If you're going to go with Jared Goff, I recommend going with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He torched the Bears, 10 catches, 119 yards in that Week 10 game when they met. He's been on a bit of a lull lately. 6 or 7 catches, 68 to 76 yards, no touchdowns in his last 3. We don't like that. But remember, before that, he was going at least 114 yards in a 3 of a 4 game stretch, scored 3 times. They played some road games in that recent lull. I mentioned earlier, Goff is not as good on the road. At home, that's where we're going. And I mentioned with Goff, Bears are down 2 corners, no pass rush. Great ceiling game for St. Brown. And then 2 more quickly. Jerry Jeudy, dealing with an ankle injury. So people are going to fade him, which is good. Now, I know we're not chasing those 3 touchdowns he had against Kansas City a few weeks ago. That's who he's playing. Week 14, 8 catches, 73 yards, 3 touchdowns. We know he's not scoring 3 touchdowns here. But he does have at least 73 yards in his last 3 games. He has at least 63 in his last 6 full games. He's seen 8 to 10 targets in his last 3. It's very likely they trail. Game script will be his friend. He is running many of his routes, almost 70% in the slot, where he gets a free release. And with Cortland Sutton healthy, the defense will be more worried about him on the perimeter. Jahan Dotson, if you want to save money, this is a tournament-only play because he has a low floor. Jahan Dotson scored a touchdown in each of his last 3 games. His yardage, 54, 105, and 76, averaging 5 catches and 8 targets. Now, we understand this Cleveland-Washington game could have a lot of running. But when Carson Wentz throws, he is never afraid to let it rip. Terry McLaurin is going to see the heavier coverage. Dotson has been very productive. Cleveland is 7th in pressure rate. Washington is bottom 10 in pass protection. So the ball is going to have to get out quicker. That lends itself to Dotson more than it does to McLaurin. That's the receivers. So let's go to 2 tight ends, and then I'll move back on to the closing here. George Kittle, I'm layup here, okay? But he's tournament only because we understand that he has a bunch of games recently with 30 yards or less. But in his last 6 games, he has 3 games with at least 84 yards and 2 touchdowns, including the last 2 weeks. And the Raiders, they give up the 11th most fantasy points to tight end. They are down about 5 defensive players in this game. Their pass defense and their linebacker core is ravaged by injuries. That's where Kittle lives. Great upside game. And I actually think the Raiders are going to check out mentally here because they benched their quarterback. That's not going to go well. And then the last one. Again, you want that piece of that Detroit-Chicago game. Cole Kmet. 5 to 7 targets in 6 of his last 7 games. Last time he played Detroit, Week 10, 4 catches, 74 yards, 2 touchdowns. And even last year, Week 12 last year, 8 catches, 65 yards. Lions get the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends. They've given up 10 TDs, the most in the league. Justin Fields, what he does is when he starts running to the perimeter, the linebackers have to pinch in. Kmet runs his routes right behind the linebackers. That's why Kmet is able to do well as he did in Week 10 with Justin Fields. So he could be used in cash games. You could also use him in tournaments, but you got Kittle there as well. John Ryan, any other takes on the NFL weekend here?
Well, while you were talking, Jim, I want people to know you can go to RotoWire.com and select the optimization model for DraftKings and a lot of different other books that have the daily fantasy opportunity. And I ran 15 lineups, and all I had to do was listen to the name you were saying to like, and I clicked the like on the RotoWire site, and I clicked, and it produced 15 lineups that are optimized based on tremendous amount of analytics. And that's pretty much some of the lineups that I'm going to be using for tomorrow's DraftKings lineups.
John, that is awesome. And yeah, take advantage of that. RotoWire.com/try. 2 days free, no credit card. You can check that out at no cost to you, and hopefully it'll help you be more profitable. We have a couple questions. Tracy Jump is in the house. Tracy, you've got Zach Moss or Donovan Peoples-Jones. So Zach Moss, and I brought him up in the prop plays. He's an excellent floor play this week. He could also find the end zone in this game, and that is so he is a strong option in fantasy championship week. The problem with Donovan Peoples-Jones is not him. He's been an excellent player all year. It's been Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson has not consistently gotten production out of him. And when we look at this Cleveland-Washington game, both of these teams are a little rougher against the run. So especially Cleveland, who loves to run the ball, it's going to limit those passing attempts for Watson. And then we have to worry. Is it Peoples-Jones? Is it Cooper? Is it Njoku? And that becomes the problem. So I think Zach Moss is your safer play. And I think he has comparable upside to Peoples-Jones. So that's the route I'll go with that one. John, anything else on that?
No, I agree 100%. I agree 100%. And I see Caesar E has one for us too with Judy and Chark. Or I guess I should be Clark. But
DJ Chark. Yeah, he's going with DJ Chark, I think. Yeah. So you're welcome, Tracy. So on that one, we talked about Judy and the prop bets. Game script should be very favorable. He should get 8 to 10 targets, a chance to score. Now, DJ Chark, here's the thing. In 3 of his last 4 games, he's had over 90 yards. And in the game he didn't, I told people to sit him. And I love Chark this year. They were playing the Jets. There was no way against Sauce Gardner that Jared Goff was going to be able to get him the ball. And it was like one catch. But Chark is playing the Bears here. And I said earlier, Jalen Johnson's their best corner. He's out. And Chark has a significant advantage. And we talk about how good Jared Goff is at home. So I think Judy has a higher floor here because he's going to be over the middle. He's going to get the catches. I think Chark is your boom bust play because if for some reason they choose not to throw him the ball as much as usual, he may not get a big number of receptions. But I could see him going over 100 yards with a touchdown. So here's how you look at it when you're fantasy championship game. If you're in a game where you're about even, maybe you're a bit of a favorite, I think Judy is your solid floor play to keep you in that line. If you're an underdog and you need to swing for defense a bit, you need 18, 20 points out of them. Chark has a better chance of getting there than Judy does. So it's not a hedge answer. It's look at your lineup and I give you the options based on that. John, anything that you see differently in that?
I don't. I agree 100%.
And then Caesar, you're welcome. Alex, always glad that you're here. Thank you for being here. And Tracy, again, thanks for being here as well. All right, John Ryan, I'd love to hear your closeout line before I close out. Give your closeout line.
All righty. Well, thanks to everybody for watching the show. If you have any questions, put them in the comments section. And most of all today, especially with those semifinal games coming up in college football, resist the temptation, bet with your head, not over it, and may all the wins be yours.
John, aside from at John Ryan Sports 1, where can people find you and your work?
PredictivePlaybook.com and also winningcappers.net. Those are the 2 big sites where I appear the most.
So you definitely need to be following John on all of those platforms. For myself, the platform you're watching on now, I'm on this platform 5 days a week. On Twitter, at Jim Coventry NFL. Give me a follow there. I do threads all week long on players, on props. In the NFL playoffs, we'll be very strong on that in the off season as well. That'll be a big deal. You could catch me if you're watching this live Saturday, Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Channel 87, 1 to 3 Eastern. Sunday, 9 to 10 Eastern. If you have lineup questions for your fantasy football, I will answer those on this platform on Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern. I'll give you the why so you can make your best decision. We have questions. 2 more questions, it looks like. Or 1 more. Tracy's back. All right, Tracy, what do you got? Njoku or Komet? So, all right, here's what we have to talk about. So, Komet has really killed the Lions the last 2 matchups. Justin Fields, his mobility compromises the linebackers. That allows Komet to be a dangerous option behind those linebackers, and that's why he does well against them. Njoku, we said in Caesar's question, I believe, maybe it wasn't. It was, it's your last question, maybe. So, again, we had the same issue with Peoples-Jones, Cooper, or Njoku. Who gets the ball? And if they run the ball successfully, they may not throw a lot. We could see 20 or less passing attempts. Komet is the de facto number 1 receiver for the Bears, getting 5 to 7 targets a game. And in this premier matchup, I have to think that he is not only your floor play, but he's your ceiling play as well. And I see you're trailing by 10 points. And look, the 2 touchdowns Komet had in that game, it's not unrealistic to see him scoring 1 or 2 in this one as well. John, any last comments? I know we already signed off. Anything else?
No, I love it. Just Tracy, remember that you're trailing by 10, but that doesn't mean that you have to pick up 10 necessarily, because your opponent may pick a player that just doesn't do so well and you jump ahead. I've had that happen several times in my life, and it's just a thought there on the final. So good luck to you and hope you win.
That is a great point. Yes, and good luck to everybody out there. All right, for John Ryan, I'm Jim Coventry. Good luck in Week 17, and we will talk soon.